My son wants to go see that stupid movie with Will Ferrell in it, and I can't stand Will Ferrell because he gives me the creeps. He gives me the willies. I ain't kidding you. But ooh, I can't stand to watch him. And he wants to watch Elf every Christmas, and I'm like, ooh, that guy gives me the willies. I can't watch him in anything. I just go to another room. I go to the gym. I'm at the garage where I have a TV in there, and I watch something in there. I can't watch that guy. He just gives me the willies. The creeps, as y'all call it. He gives me the creeps. I didn't even like him on Saturday Night Live. I didn't like him. I'd turn it. Whenever he came on, I'd turn it. Ugh. You ever have an actor or an actress that gives you the willies? Well, he's one of them. He's one of them. I don't like him. The guy that played the first Spider-Man. Yeah, he gives me the willies. I don't watch him, but he's not on anything, so I don't have to worry about him. He was a one-hit wonder. He did Spider-Man, and that was it. Okay, I'll shut up. Y'all not going to talk, so. Well, I'm glad 2 decent movies are coming out, and that's Justice League and that Daddy Daycare, or whatever it's called. What's it called? Your Daddy's Home, too. Because I'm going to tell you, the movies lately have really sucked. Nothing has been on at the movie theater. Nothing. So hopefully that'll change. Maybe the Hollywood idiots will stick to making movies instead of trying to force people to vote a certain way. Maybe they'll do their job. I'm going to pull up the last section and see what we haven't covered. If I could type in dadgum. All right, y'all are Math 103. This is the last this is the last brouhaha.
Do you have a clause after this one?
Do I have a what?
A clause after this?
No, I do not, but we have to get out of here because they beat down the door. So we'll have to go to my office. You need me to do your schedule, right?
Yeah.
I think this is E, right? No, we were doing federal. That's what we were doing. Wasn't we going into federal? Yeah. This is where we can really get on our soapboxes here. Because we talked about the debt clock, right?
Yes.
Okay. So got y'all depressed about that. What else do we need to depress y'all about? We'll depress y'all about something. Just, let's see, priority. And there we go. I haven't heard from Xavier. I told him to send me a picture of his screen. He hadn't sent me one yet. So that, you know what that tells me? That tells me that he's messed up something. So we'll just have to, hopefully he'll get on soon. All right. Okay, receipts or income. We talked about that. That's where we pulled up the debt clock. Net income, the budget has a surplus, deficit. And that's deficit is, and there's a difference between national debt and national deficit. The deficit is when we don't pay our bills for that year. That's the deficit. The national debt is what I showed you on the debt clock. All right, so that's the difference between the two. Know the difference in those two because, you know, that may be, I don't know, it would be a test question on a standardized test, but the difference between deficit and debt, that might be on the standardized test. Deficit is what you owe for that year, for that fiscal year. All right, and if you add all your fiscal years up that you owe, that's called a deficit. I mean debt, I'm sorry, debt. Make sure you get them right. Okay? Okay, did we do this one? Okay, suppose your gross income last year was $40,000. Your expenditures were as follows: $20,000 for rent and food, $2,000 for interest on your credit cards and student loans, $6,000 for car expenses, and $9,000 for entertainment and miscellaneous expenses. You also paid $8,000 in taxes. Did you have a deficit or a surplus? Well, hold on a second. We're going to go to our handy dandy spreadsheet, because there's two things I want you to be able to do with this problem. One is answer the question, and two is I want you to give me some kind of a graph on what you're spending. Okay, so snip, new, and we're going to grab this out. Well, yeah, I'm going to put that there, and I'm going to bring up my Excel spreadsheet. I'm going to try to do this so y'all can see it, because I try to do everything for y'all, the things I do for y'all. Oh, me. I ought to be like these bad teachers don't care. That's what I ought to do. There we go. All right. So I'm just going to put the things down. There. So 20,000. This is for, let's see, 20,000 for rent and food. Rent / food is 20,000. Interest on credit cards to interest. I'm going to say interest paid. Interest paid is how much? 2,000. Car expenses. Heckgum, you got an expensive car. Car expenses 6,000. That'd probably be gas. Most of it's gas. 9,000. Entertainment. Good gosh. What are you doing? Entertaining the Pope? Entertainment. Oh yeah, I forgot. Entertainment is most important nowadays. Okay, is that good? You also paid $8,000 in taxes. Now, of course, what do you do there? You total it up. And let's see what you got. 45,000. So what do you got? You made 40,000, so you owe $4,000 or $5,000, whatever, or 5,000. There it is. So there is a deficit of $5,000. Now, if you do that 2 years in a row, then that means you've got a debt of what? 10,000. You understand? That's the difference between deficit and debt. Can't do a graph here because you can't do a graph if it doesn't equal what? 40,000. Okay, now you can do it if you have a surplus, but since you have a debt, your numbers won't come out right. So we're not going to do one on this one. Okay, maybe we'll do one on another one. But I tell you what, let's do this. Let's take off 3,000 with that last one. Okay, let's take off 3,000 right here. And let's say you paid $3,000 on taxes. Now I want you to do a pie graph, because that's usually what you do with economics. So you hit that, you go to insert, you go to charts. Dang old, I like this one. And there you go. Now that tells you absolutely what? Nothing. So you leave it like that and quit, right? Nope. Go over here to your handy dandy and you can do input right here. I think you can. Legends. And you can also, you should be able to, somewhere in percentage, here we go. You can take the value out and you can just do 50%, blah, blah, blah. Now, or you can add the value right there. And $20,000 is half. So that's how you do a graph. And you need to know that. I mean, even if even if you don't, need this class, you need to be able to make a graph. And if you can't make a graph and you're going into the workforce, then you need to take CPT 170 at least, because you can put the legend key, you can put that there, you don't have to. You can put the label in the center. I'd put it on the outside end like that. And of course, you've got to put a title on your chart. How I waste my money. You can put that on there. Okay. That's it. Okay. So make sure you can do those two things. Make sure you can decide whether there's a surplus or a deficit, and make sure you can do a graph if asked. Okay. Deficit, blah blah blah. This is debt. That's the difference. Okay, I don't have to go through that. All right, let's look at this one. The national debt, the federal debt at the end of 2013 was approximately $17 trillion. If this debt were divided evenly among the 315 million people in the United States, how much would we owe? I want you to do this by hand. Using what? Scientific what? Notation. Because these are BA numbers.
You have a work email.
BA numbers use scientific notation. You ever eaten macadamia nuts? Oh my gosh. They're as bad as cashews. They're addictive. But they're good for you. They're like avocados. They're the avocados of the nut world. You want one? Body? I want one? Don't worry, I'm just open. I didn't lace it with anything, okay? See? Still got the thing on. Yep. 1 cup. No, 1/4 cup. That's this thing right here. I guess that's one of them. Has 23 grams of fat. That's good fat. It's not Cheeto fat. Cheetos. No hiccuping in class. Still haven't received a picture from him. All right, so we're going to use our handy dandy writer here. Now, 17 trillion whatever. Okay, nothing's working. Why isn't anything working? Where's the other? Okay, I guess somebody stole it. Okay, now I don't have a mouse. There's the mouse. At least I know I have the mouse now. Hold on a second. Y'all know whose fault it is. Some Russians. So 17 trillion that's million, that's billion, and that's what? Trillion. Divided by 315 what? Now there's two ways to do that. Three ways. One is calculator. Two is to cancel out 6 zeros on top and bottom. You can do that. That's fine. So I'm going to do that. And then that's going to leave me with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1.7 times 10 to the blank 7th power. I don't do that. That's probably Xavier. No. Probably somebody trying to sell me a timeshare. 3.15 times 10 to the blank 2. Which way do we move this decimal in our head to get back the way it was? To the right. Which way do we move this decimal right here in our head to get it the same way to the right? So that's going to be 1.7 divided by 3.15 times 10 to the 7 minus 2. Now, 1.7 divided by 3.15, somebody do that in your calculator. What do you get? You can do that in your calculator, that's okay. .7 divided by 3.15.
Like 0.5396.
Is that what everybody got?
We have a little number.
5396 times 10 to the 5th power, which is 5396. Give me the other numbers. 5396 what?
68.
I'm sorry, what?
68.
68. So move your decimal over 5 places. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So each person, if each person would pay $54,000, we would have our national debt paid off. Anybody want to volunteer? So that's what I don't understand. All these people, especially in Hollywood, they say that we like income equality and all these billionaires and millionaires. Why don't they take some of their million and equal it out, pay some of the national debt off? Why don't they do that? It might mess up in their homeless donations than they have in Hollywood. So it comes out to be $54,000. Capiche? Now, when you're working for the National Debt Clock or the USDA and you're putting these figures together, you've got to learn how to use scientific notation, unless you just like punching a bunch of zeros. And that comes out to be 5.4 times blah, blah, blah. And that's what we got. We got the same thing, only my decimal is to the left of the 5. It'd be the same thing. $54,000. That's what we got down there in the lower left-hand corner. $54,000. All right, look at this one. Economists also commonly consider the deficit and debt numbers as percentages of gross domestic product. GDP, very important number I've told you. For 2012, the GDP was 15.6 trillion. The total deficit was 1.1 trillion, and the end of year debt was 6.1 trillion. Find the deficit and debt as percentages of the GDP. So do that. Usually a percentage is something with a bigger number on the bottom, usually. So you've got 2 or 3 numbers there. You got 15.6 trillion, and then you got 16.1 trillion. That's the 2 different GDPs. End of year debt was blah, 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 and the GDP was 15.6. The total deficit was 1.1 trillion. So find the deficit as percentages of GDP. So they give you the GDP was 15.6 million. The total deficit was 1.1 trillion, and the end of the year deficit was 16.1 trillion. So it looks like to me you're going to divide by 15.6 trillion. And that's going to again be, yeah, you're going to divide by, there it is right there, GDP. So do that. Take each one of them, the 1.1 trillion and the 16.1 trillion, and divide by 15.6 trillion. I wonder if this is a cup or half a cup. There's that one. And then the other one, 16.1 trillion. Wait a minute, shouldn't we add those 2 together? Looks like we should add those 2 together, should we not? Looks like this one. But see, they throw it off by saying the total. Okay, yeah. Total deficit was 1.1 trillion, so that'd be this one. Of course, this cancels, this cancels. This cancels, and you're left with 1.1 times 10 to the, what, third over 1.5 times 10 to the fourth 1.56. So somebody take 1.1 and divide by 1.56, what do you get?
0.705,
0.705 and 1 what?
1.3.
Times 10 to the negative 1, which means 0.070513. Is that what y'all got? 7%. 7.1%. Okay? And then the next one, if they, that scares me the way they've got it written because you could add them together. But that goes out, that goes out, that goes out. 1.61 times 10 to the 4th over 1.56 times 10 to the 4th. And basically, what's 1.61 divided by 1.56? What do you get?
One 1.03205.
1.032 what?
05.
05. 1.03, which would be 103%. I don't like that one, but this one seems to be right. But I'm thinking they're adding those two for the second part. But the way the question is written, it's hard to determine is that what they want, if that's what they're wanting. Here's 7.1. We got that. Total debt. Okay, we got it right. I don't like the way the question's worded though. Both values are high relative to historical averages. That's interesting. But not nearly as much as the actual dollar amounts numbers suggested. Mandatory outlays. I'm not going to worry about that. Discretionary outlays. Go ahead and write those down just for your information. You don't have to write down every single word. But mandatory outlays, and okay, this word you need to know. What comes after mandatory outlays are for what? Entitlements. You need to write that word down because you need to know what you're entitled to, because some people think that you're entitled to what? Everything, and you're not. Okay? Entitlements are stuff like Social Security and Medicare. That's the stuff that you pay for. You pay for it when you get old and decrepit or get to where you can't move, you get it back. All right? Those are called entitlements. They're called entitlements because you give to that. You give to that, so you should be able to get something out of it. Discretionary outlays. They're the things that you vote on, such as defense fund, such as the shrimp running on the treadmill. Yep, our U.S. government pays money to watch a shrimp on a treadmill. Look it up, Google it. We also have plenty of bridges that go where? Nowhere. Look it up. If people were more aware of what our politicians do in Washington, there'd be a lot of pissed off people. A lot. There's the federal revenue. Federal revenue, Social Security, income tax, corporate, excise tax, and then federal spending. Look how much bigger the federal spending circle is than the federal income. Champagne taste on what? Beer budget. And that's why people fight big government, because this circle keeps getting bigger and bigger, and this circle keeps getting what? Smaller and smaller. That's why we keep having a national debt. I'm not talking about the national deficit. That's why we keep having a yearly national deficit. The more people that work at DHEC, the more people we have to pay. The more people that work at IRS, the more people we have to pay. That's why we got an administration now that wants to cut regulations. If you cut regulations, that means not as many people has to work for who? DHEC. If you do a tax cut and fix it to where everybody can do it on an index card, that does away with half the people that work where? At the IRS, and they have to get out and get a real what? A real job. So some administrations want this circle to go down. Some want it to go up. You have to ask yourself, why would you want it to go up? Well, if everybody worked for the government, you would have total what? As a president or a Congress, you have total what? Control. Control? What does that have to do with anything? All right, look at this one. For 2012, interest on the debt totaled $360 billion. And the total debt at that time was around $16 trillion. What was the annual interest rate paid for by the government? Suppose instead that interest rates paid for by the government had been their historical average at 3%. How would that affect the interest rate? Well, the debt is $16 trillion and the interest is $360 billion. So you're going to divide that to get your interest rate. They say it's about 3%. Go ahead and let's see what it comes out to be. Where's the interest rate? There we go. Actually, it's 2.3%, where they're measured at 3%. So take the 360 billion and divide by 16. So you need to write that down, because that's what you take the interest and divide by the debt, and that gives you 2.3%. Well, they were assuming it's what? Had been at their historical average of about what? 3%. So 2.3% is a little bit better than 3%. How would that affect the interest payments in 2012? Comment on blah, 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 total 2012 government on education and blah, 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 blah. There it is. There's a 3% times 16 billion. So you see the difference. Okay? So it saves a little bit of money. I don't care about you knowing all that, but notice that interest payments, blah, 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 spent on blah, 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 with negative historical budget rates would have been the budget far worse. I saw a commercial this morning that says, don't let our politicians in Washington explode the national debt another $1.5 trillion. I'm like, you're really worried about the national debt now, when in the last 10 years we went from $7 trillion to $20 trillion. In the last 10 years, you're really worried about the debt. Oh, that made me mad when I saw that commercial. The publicly held debt, publicly held debt, or net debt, represents the money the government must repay to individuals and institutions that bought treasury issues, named what? Bonds. Okay. The gross debt includes both the publicly held and the money that the government owes to its own trust fund. Now, what's wrong with this statement? Owes to its own trust fund, such as Social Security. Why would we owe money to Social Security? Because we're spending it. It's kind of like when you have a son or a daughter and you give them allowance, and then when they're not there, you steal their allowance and go out and buy yourself a Coke. That's what the federal government's doing with Social Security and Medicare. It's supposed to be for y'all, but what are they doing to it? They're using it. But this is not important. You don't need to learn this stuff. Makes you wonder why they didn't teach you this in high school. Unified budget represents all federal revenues and spending. That's everything. Off budget, I'm not getting into these. These are just things you hardly never hear. I'm going to go over that one. Because a lot of times you get in this is a lot of stuff that I'm not going to get into. Right, remember, new minus old over old. Remember that. That's it. Okay, so this is what the schedule is going to look like for the next week. Well, if I can get to there we go. So, what's today? Today is the what? The 12th? 13th. Today's the 13th. So that means Wednesday will be the 15th, right? 15th. Homework questions. What chapter are we on? 4? 4 or 7? 4. 4 A through 4E. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to tell you right now, there's not a lot going to be on. F is just for your information mainly. So that means that what's the next Tuesday or next Monday?
The 20th?
I'm asking you. Look on your calendar. Is it?
Just the
20th. On the 20th, we'll be going through the review. Review test. Okay? And then that means on the 22nd, test.
So we can do the test over our Thanksgiving break.
Pretty much. What? What?
It'll be Thanksgiving break that week already.
Yeah, we're almost done.
Wait, so next week is a full week. and-
Technically, y'all are done because I'm not going over again forward, so y'all don't have to come back.
It's just Monday and Tuesday.
And then Thanksgiving?
Yeah.
No, it's Christmas.
No.
Thanksgiving?
No, it's not. Oh, no.
Now,
At a time, guys.
this is, I'm going to go ahead and tell you this right now. No classes. I'll be in my office. No classes after Thanksgiving because we're done. Unless y'all want to go over Unit 4. And I don't go over Unit 4, so it's not detrimental to you being a good 120 student. So let me go ahead and I'll cover some stuff about the final exam and all that. I'll cover that probably right in here. Let me go ahead and put that so y'all can remind me. All right? Right in here, I will talk about the final week of class. I always do that. Anybody that's had me before knows that I go over the final week of class. And I usually send you an email, so that way I don't have any what? DA questions. Okay? So that's when most of your questions will be answered about the final week of class on the 22nd. Question on that? All right, then what y'all need to be doing is working on homework and sending me questions, and I'll see y'all Wednesday. Okay?
Do we have another class?
No, I'm done with that crap. I only had to do 2. I think we did 2, didn't we?
Yeah.
So,
Just say yes.
So we don't have to do the final? You're not to make us.
I have to do 5. Yeah, I have to do that just so they'll get off my back. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I have to do that. Jump through these hoops. I don't want to do it, but I have to. So, oops. Let me turn off the recorder. I have to jump through these hoops. It's a pain in the butt, but I have
So
to.
you'll open up the test on the 22nd.
probably I'll open up the test, the final exam, but I'll talk about that on the 22nd. You're starting into the questions that I'm gonna ask, that I'm gonna go over on the 22nd. Okay? Anything with final exam in it, hold those questions till after I finished on the 22nd. All right, y'all get out of here. Have a good day.